Why you should never explain your pain twice. Think about the last time someone hurt you, and you tried to explain it. Not once, not quickly, not casually. You explained it with patience. You chose your words carefully. You tried not to sound angry. You tried not to blame them too much. You tried to make them understand that what they said, what they did, or how they treated you actually hurt. And for a moment, you thought they understood. Maybe they nodded. Maybe they said, "Okay." Maybe they said, "I didn't mean it like that." Maybe they even said sorry. But then it happened again. The same behavior, the same tone, the same disrespect, the same coldness, the same joke, the same silence, the same wound. And there you were again, explaining the same pain to the same person. That is where something inside you should pause. Because one explanation can be communication. But explaining your pain again and again becomes self-abandonment. The first time, you are giving someone clarity. The second time, you are giving them access to hurt you again. And if they still do not understand after you clearly told them what hurt you, maybe they are not confused. Maybe they are comfortable. Comfortable with your pain. Comfortable with your patience. Comfortable with the fact that you will keep explaining instead of leaving. This is why you should never explain your pain twice. Not because you are cold. Not because you are cruel. Not because people do not deserve chances. But because your pain is not a language that needs translation forever. If someone truly cares about you, they may not understand everything perfectly at first, but they will care enough to become careful. They will remember. They will adjust. They will not keep stepping on the same place, and then act surprised when you bleed again. If this is your first time on the Hidden Hurts, subscribe right now and turn on the bell. This channel is about the pain people hide, the patterns people repeat, and the dark truths about human behavior that most people only understand after they have been hurt. Subscribe now, because if you have ever explained your pain to someone who kept repeating the same behavior, this video is going to give words to something you may have been carrying silently for years. Let's begin with the first truth. People who care do not need unlimited explanations. They need honesty once, maybe twice, if the situation is complicated, but they do not need you to build a courtroom for your pain every week. They do not need 10 paragraphs. They do not need proof. They do not need you to cry in front of them before they believe you. A person who cares may say, "I didn't realize it hurt you." But after that, they become careful. They do not use ignorance as a permanent excuse. They do not say, "I forgot," every time they repeat the same wound. They do not make you feel like your pain is a problem because it keeps returning. Because the reason it keeps returning is simple. They keep doing the same thing. And that is the difference between a mistake and a pattern. A mistake needs explanation. A pattern needs distance. Read that again. A mistake needs explanation. A pattern needs distance. Because when you keep explaining a pattern, you are no longer teaching them. You are training yourself to tolerate it. You are teaching yourself that your pain is only valid if the other person agrees. You are teaching yourself that your boundaries need permission. You are teaching yourself that disrespect deserves another lecture instead of a consequence. And the wrong people love that. They love when you explain instead of leaving. They love when you talk instead of changing access. They love when you defend your feelings instead of protecting them. Because as long as you are explaining, they still have you. As long as you are trying to make them understand, they still have control over the conversation. And as long as you are waiting for them to admit the truth, your peace is still in their hands. Type, "I explained enough," in the comments if you have ever found yourself repeating the same pain to someone who already knew. Because many people watching this know exactly what that feels like. They know what it feels like to sit there with a heavy chest, trying to explain something that should have been obvious. They know what it feels like to hear, "I didn't know," after telling the person many times. They know what it feels like to wonder, "Am I not explaining it properly? Am I being unclear? Maybe I should say it another way." But listen carefully. Sometimes the problem is not your explanation. Sometimes the problem is their willingness. Some people do not misunderstand you. They simply do not want the responsibility that comes with understanding you. Because once they understand, they cannot pretend anymore. Once they understand, they have to change. Once they understand, they lose the excuse. So they act confused. They ask more questions. They shift the topic. They focus on your tone. They say you are too emotional. They say you are bringing up the past. They say you always make things serious. And suddenly, you are no longer talking about what hurts you. You are defending the way you communicated your hurt. That is how they escape accountability. They move the spotlight from their behavior to your reaction. They make the conversation about how you said it, not why you had to say it. And if you fall into that trap, you will spend years polishing your pain so it becomes easier for someone else to ignore. You will say it softer. You will say it calmer. You will say it with examples. You will say it with tears. You will say it without tears. You will say it in a message. You will say it face to face. And still, they will repeat the same thing, because clarity was never the issue. Respect was. Like this video right now, if you have ever realized that someone understood your pain perfectly, they just did not care enough to stop and share this video with someone who keeps explaining the same wound to the same person. Sometimes one clear message can help someone finally stop begging to be understood by someone who benefits from misunderstanding them. Now let's talk about the second truth. Repeated explanations make you emotionally tired, not because speaking is hard, but because begging someone to care is exhausting. There is a special kind of tiredness that comes from explaining pain to someone who caused it. You are already hurt, but now you also have to be calm. You have to be clear. You have to be fair. You have to be mature. You have to choose the right timing. You have to avoid sounding too emotional. You have to protect their feelings while explaining how they damaged yours. And after all of that, they still might say, "You are overreacting." That is not communication. That is emotional labor. And if you keep doing that with someone who does not change, you will start losing trust in yourself. You will begin to think your pain is too complicated. You will begin to think your emotions are too much. You will begin to believe that you need to explain better before you deserve respect. But respect does not require a perfect presentation. Someone who cares does not need your pain to be professionally delivered before they become careful. They do not need you to speak like a lawyer. They do not need evidence, witnesses, and a timeline. They listen because it is you. They care because it hurts you. That is emotional safety. Emotional safety is not when someone understands every detail immediately. It is when they take your pain seriously even while they are still learning it. But emotionally unsafe people do the opposite. They make you prove the wound. They make you defend the wound. They make you explain why the wound should matter. And if you cannot convince them, they act like the wound does not exist. That is why you must be careful, because the more you explain to someone who refuses to care, the more power you give them over your reality. They become the judge. Your pain becomes the case. Your explanation becomes the evidence. And their approval becomes the verdict. But your pain does not need their verdict. You know what happened. You know how it felt. You know how many times you tried. You know how many chances you gave. You know how many nights you stayed awake replaying the conversation, wondering why they could not understand something so simple. Maybe they could understand. Maybe they just did not want to change. That is the third truth. Some people use your explanations to study how to hurt you better. This is painful to admit, but it is real. When you explain your pain to someone who cares, they use that information to protect you. When you explain your pain to someone who does not care, they may use that information to control you. You tell them what hurts you. Now they know where the wound is. You tell them what makes you anxious. Now they know what button to press. You tell them what makes you feel abandoned. Now they know how to punish you with distance. You tell them what makes you feel guilty. Now they know how to pull you back. This is why your vulnerability should not be given to everyone. Some people do not deserve detailed access to your inner world, because they are not trying to understand your pain. They are collecting instructions. Instructions on how to reach you. Instructions on how to disturb you. Instructions on how to make you react. Instructions on how to keep you explaining. And once you see that, silence becomes protection. Not silent treatment. Not revenge. Not childish withdrawal. Protection. A kind of silence that says, "I have already told you. I have already explained. I have already shown you where it hurts. Now I will watch what you do with that information. because that is where truth appears, not in how they respond during the conversation, but in how they behave after it. Anyone can sound sorry for one night. Anyone can promise change when they are afraid of losing you. Anyone can say, "I understand now." But real understanding is memory. Real understanding changes behavior. Real understanding does not need to be reminded every week. A person who truly understood your pain will not keep asking you why you were hurt by the same thing. They will not keep acting surprised. They will not keep making you feel dramatic. They will remember. And if they do not remember, maybe the pain was never important to them. Now think about the person who came to your mind during this video. The one you kept explaining yourself to. The one who always seemed confused. The one who made you feel guilty for bringing things up. The one who said, "Why are we talking about this again?" Ask yourself honestly, did they really not understand? Or did they understand enough to know you would keep staying anyway? That question can hurt. But it can also free you. Because when you stop believing they are confused, you stop trying to educate them. You start protecting yourself. You stop writing long messages. You stop over-explaining. You stop giving emotional access to someone who keeps proving they are careless with it. You stop saying, "Maybe this time they will finally get it." And you start saying, "They already had enough information." That is not bitterness. That is wisdom. That is not giving up too early. That is refusing to abandon yourself late. The fourth truth is this. If you have to explain your pain twice, the second explanation should not be longer. It should be shorter. The first time, you can explain. You can be kind. You can say, "This hurt me. This made me uncomfortable. I do not want this to happen again." But if it happens again, you do not need a speech. You need a boundary. You can say, "I already told you this hurt me. I am not explaining it again. I will not keep participating in this pattern. I need distance now." That is enough. Because some people do not respect words until they meet consequences. And consequences do not always mean punishment. Sometimes consequences simply mean access changes. You get less of me, less of my time, less of my emotional energy, less of my vulnerability, less of my patience, less of my explanations. Because if someone keeps hurting a place you already showed them, they should not keep getting the same closeness. Closeness is a privilege. Access is a privilege. Your heart is a privilege. And people who repeatedly mishandle it should not keep receiving unlimited chances to prove what they have already shown. This is where many good people struggle. Because good people think distance is cruel. They think boundaries are harsh. They think not explaining is rude. But sometimes, explaining less is the first sign that you finally respect yourself. You are not being cruel. You are stopping the cycle. You are no longer turning your wound into a presentation. You are no longer asking someone to care after they have already shown you how much they do. You are no longer making your peace dependent on their understanding. That is growth. And yes, some people will not like it. They will say, "You changed. You do not communicate anymore. You are acting cold. You are not the same." But maybe you changed because explaining your pain to them was slowly destroying you. Maybe you became quiet because your words were being wasted. Maybe you became distant because closeness kept costing you peace. Maybe you are not cold. Maybe you are finally done burning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. This is the dark lesson. Some people only call it communication when you keep explaining. But the moment you set a boundary, they call it attitude. They liked your explanations because your explanations kept you available. They liked your patience because your patience protected them from consequences. They liked your emotional openness because it gave them access. But when you stop explaining and start acting differently, suddenly they feel attacked. That reaction tells you everything. They did not want understanding. They wanted access without accountability. And once accountability arrives, they reveal who they are. So the next time you feel the urge to explain your pain again, pause. Ask yourself, have I already said this? Did they already know this hurt me? Did anything change after the first explanation? Am I explaining because they need clarity or because I am afraid to set a boundary? That last question matters. Because many people do not explain twice because the other person needs it. They explain twice because they are afraid of what happens if they stop. Afraid the person will leave. Afraid the person will call them dramatic. Afraid the person will make them feel guilty. Afraid that silence will feel mean. But you must understand this. You do not owe unlimited explanation to someone who gives you repeated pain. You do not owe emotional essays to people who ignore simple sentences. You do not owe access to anyone who keeps stepping on a wound they already know exists. Your pain is not a debate. Your boundary is not a negotiation. Your peace is not a courtroom. And your heart is not a place where careless people get endless chances to prove the same thing. The final truth is simple. Explain once with honesty. Watch twice with clarity. Then choose yourself. Not with anger. Not with revenge. Not with drama. With calm self-respect. Because the person who cares will use your first explanation as a guide. The person who does not care will use your second explanation as proof that you are still willing to stay. And once you understand that, you stop begging to be understood. You stop repeating your pain to people who heard you the first time. You stop confusing communication with self-erasure. You stop handing your peace to someone who keeps pretending not to know where it hurts. Comment: I explained enough. If you have ever repeated your pain to someone who already knew. Like this video if it gave you clarity about someone in your life. And subscribe to The Hidden Hurts for more videos about dark psychology, human behavior, self-respect, emotional intelligence, betrayal, hidden motives, and the painful truths people only understand after they finally wake up. Remember this before you go. One explanation is communication. Two explanations can be mercy. But explaining the same pain forever is how you slowly disappear in front of someone who was never trying to understand you. Choose peace. Choose distance. Choose yourself.